Stay tuned. The nation hits a new record high as COVID-19 cases breached the 21,000 mark. A total of 21,668 new cases were recorded, with 318 deaths in the past 24 hours. Selangor continues to top the list at 6,278 cases. Alongside a national record, Sabah today also broke its own record for the highest number of COVID-19 cases per day at 2,052 new infections. On that note, despite the vaccination surge and endless lockdowns, hospitalization and deaths from COVID-19 remain stubbornly high. Tonight on Consider This, we ask our guests what's working and what's not, as the public feels increasingly frustrated. The tabling of vote of confidence in Parliament has been scheduled for September 7th, a day after the Dewan Rakyat reconvenes for the fourth term. Communications and Multimedia Minister Datuk Saifuddin Abdullah said that the notice of the motion has been issued by the Dewan Rakyat Speaker. The legitimacy of Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin's government has been in question following the announcement by UMNO President Datuk Sri Ahmad Zahid Hamidi on the party's decision to withdraw support for the Prime Minister. Following which, Muhyiddin announced that he will put himself through a vote of confidence when Parliament reconvenes to determine the legitimacy of his government. Leading to the vote of confidence for Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, what are the possible outcomes to expect? We speak to political analyst Dr. Wong Chin Huat.
So if you had the Prime Minister defeated on the confidence vote after the royal speech, it means that a new government might be formed and you would have the king to deliver another royal speech representing another government. It would be rather disrespectful to the royal institution that the royal speech is not given the rightful respect. So I believe as the government now has a very fragile majority, the public pressure may eventually make the vote happen earlier, possibly as early as next week. In the event that the Prime Minister is defeated on the confidence vote, he would have to seek and get royal consent to dissolve the Parliament or resign. Now, assuming in the event of his resignation, then the Parliament should move on to install another Prime Minister who can enjoy the majority support of the House. Because the Parliament is in session, there's no reason for the King to play an additional role in guessing who may enjoy the majority support.
In a scenario where Muhyiddin is to be defeated in the motion of confidence, what will be the way forward for a stable government?
Now what we come to is, what if there is no government, no party leader can actually form a majority government? The option then is for the government, for the largest party, for the MP with the largest support to reach out to other parties who may not want to join the government but is willing to give the government conditional support so that the government can survive on a vote of confidence, no confidence, budget and royal speech.
A confidence and supply agreement would allow a government to seek conditional support from the opposition parties without them having to join the government. How would this be better for the country moving forward?
If, let's say, you're going to have a CSA, the CSA opposition would ask for parliamentary reform, equal funding, also certain concessions on policy so that they can deliver the outcome that their voters want. Also likely that opposition may want to ask for some other institutional reform.
He also highlighted another possibility whereby Muhyiddin is defeated but remain as MP with most support, where he would remain as Prime Minister of a minority government. Amid the pandemic, we have seen a rise in youth-led movements calling out injustices and demanding policy reforms. These movements are pertinent in promoting youth activism and advocacy in a functioning democracy. On International Youth Day, we speak to Kira Yusri, co-founder of Undi 18, on how youths have been at the forefront in driving change.
I think if you look past the past couple of years that we've been living in a pandemic, young people have come up with creative ways to have their voices heard, in terms of everything that's been happening. You see, especially when it comes to social media, young people who are, we've been growing up in a more technologically savvy world. We're very used to recognizing our audiences. You see a growth of new movements and new youth NGOs mushrooming on social media, using their influence to highlight social causes such as the Orang Asli causes, climate change, women's issues, and so on and so forth.
Kira stressed the importance of creating safe spaces for youth to speak up and for government to play a role in shaping young minds to become future leaders of the country.
I think, especially in a country like Malaysia, where we have democratic practices, we want to expose young people to these democratic values at a much younger age, even in school. So we need to create these spaces so that they are familiarized with these concepts, that when they grow into adulthood, they're able to, become informed citizens, they're able to become informed voters, they're able to become citizens who can hold their elected leaders accountable. So if the government wants to holistically and develop young people to become mature leaders, to encourage youth activism and youth advocacy, we need to look into existing structures and see what are some of the barriers that prevents young people from speaking up. Because I think it's one thing to talk about being accepting and being open, but it's another thing to not look into these institutional reforms seriously, because with those laws still being around, you have young people who are still going to be very afraid of speaking up because they know that their education, their scholarships may still be in jeopardy. So, if you want to have a future, or if you want to have a generation of youth that is confident, that is holistic, that is empathetic, that is brave, we need to remove these structures and re-look at how we actually educate and groom young Malaysians to become critical leaders in the future.
We'll take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Habitat loss continues to be the primary threat to the existence of wildlife, including the endangered Borneo pygmy elephant. With fewer than 1,500 of them left in the wild, elephant ecologist Dr. Nur Zafarina Othman says Malaysia needs to step up to find a way to coexist with the gentle giants.
Last year, the government of Sabah have approved the Elephant State Action Plan, the latest one, which will serve as a guideline for all the wildlife managers, for all the stakeholders, how to manage elephant population in their area. So, and from then, we could see that local government, for example, the district office, for example, they taking quite proactive action. For example, they set up like a task force to implement all this action plan. So I'm quite happy. Although we have, still cases where I'm sorry, I am actually on my way to Kinabatangan, so. So I would say that I'm pretty happy that a lot of action is happening to make sure all the stakeholders could involve in the efforts to conserve the burden elephants. But obviously the restriction in terms of movement, our rangers, we cannot go out more actively. So there are still quite a lot of numbers of conflict that is happening.
Dr. Zafarina urges the government to take the matter seriously by identifying elephant corridors and maintain critical forest areas to prevent the pygmy elephants from disappearing entirely.
At least when we can identify the regular pathway the elephants are usually used, we should reduce, for example, pressures. That we should remove the electric fence, for example, or we respect and we give a chance, some time for them to pass. We should divert them in using a peaceful method. You don't force them to leave the area. You try to understand their needs, their biology, and you try to understand their behavior as well.
In Sabah, conflicts between man and elephant have existed since the 1960s, when people started encroaching into jungles for agricultural development, particularly for the cultivation of oil palm. Since 2010, it is reported that around 145 cases of elephant deaths have been recorded in Sabah due to poaching, poisoning, as well as accidents and illnesses. One shocking case in 2019 involved an elephant that was found dead in Kalabakan, Tawau, with 70 bullets embedded in its body and its tusks removed. Last month, the perpetrator was found guilty and sentenced to 4 years imprisonment for the brutal killing. The Borneo pygmy elephant is a fully protected species under the first schedule of the Sabah Wildlife Conservation Enactment 1997. In 2016, the state government amended the enactment to provide for stiffer penalties for offences committed against wildlife. Convicted offenders face a fine up to 250,000 ringgit and a jail term of not less than 5 years. However, conservationists say despite stiffer penalties, there is still no end to the man-elephant conflict in Sabah. More needs to be done to protect the elephants and sustain its population.
On to the international front, Australian capital Canberra went into a snap lockdown at 5 p.m. today after recording its first case of COVID-19 in more than a year. The lockdown was called for the whole of the territory, home to around 400,000 people, because authorities said they were unsure how the infected person caught the virus. Meanwhile, New South Wales state government said extra military personnel may be called in to ensure compliance with lockdown rules in Sydney. Despite 7 weeks of lockdown in Sydney, daily infections continue to hover near record highs. New South Wales reported 345 new locally acquired cases today, most of them in Sydney. Meanwhile, Victoria State reported 21 new local infections today as 5 million residents of Melbourne prepare to enter a second week of lockdown. Forest fires in Algeria killed 69 people, including 28 soldiers deployed to help put out the blaze. 12 soldiers remain in critical condition after dozens of fires raged through northern Algeria since Monday night. Although wildfires are not uncommon in northern Algeria, the recent fire is one of the most widespread in recent memory. The Mediterranean had become a wildfire hotspot as massive blaze engulfed forests in Turkey and Greece, aided by a heat wave. Temperatures in parts of Italy, Tunisia and Algeria had surpassed a record 48 degrees Celsius in recent days. Spain and Portugal, meanwhile, are bracing for heat wave as temperatures were forecast to start building from today. That is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news update on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and the Astro AWANI app. I'm Fahana Sheh. We'll see you again.